Hey everybody, Tony D with a lamp video, screenwriter's take on The Trip from Netflix, which I just watched with Naomi. Can't say her last name. I want to say Pace, but it's not Pace. It's kind of like Pace, but it's not. It's the original actress from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. If you've seen the original version, which was Norwegian, I believe, or Swedish. Anywho, as always, I'm going to do a non-spoiler review first up front, and then you go see the movie if you want. And then on the back end, we'll break down the nitty-gritty, smash like, etc., etc. Links in the description if you'd like to support the channel. So the non-spoiler review, it's a little hard not to give anything away with a plot like this. If you've seen the trailer and you've seen my breakdown of it, you already know that I like the trailer. I thought it was a good thing. The most pleasant surprise in this whole thing is it was dubbed. Thank God it was dubbed, because it was the sort of movie, and I've talked about this before, subtitles can take you out of it. And with a movie like this, it would have been really hard to enjoy with subtitles. It really would have. Because you kind of got to look down where you're watching the dialogue and away from the actor's face. And if they're doing, especially if they're doing something comedic, in this case, I would call this a dark comedy. It's not really billed as a comedy, but that's what I would call it. And the premise is, and if you want absolutely no spoilers, I guess you'd go watch it now. But the premise is, it's about a couple. They really kind of hate each other, and they've both decided to, each has decided separately to kill the other for the insurance money. So they go away to a cabin to do it. And of course, it goes wrong. They end up not killing each other, and things kind of escalate from there. And without giving too much away, they end up kind of getting back together. And, you know, because obviously if they kill each other at the end, I don't know if that would be really a comedy. I guess you could make it work. But it's really good. It's really good. It's the kind of movie you saw plenty of in the 80s and 90s. More in the 90s, I would say. I say it's more of a 90s movie. And it has sort of the pacing of a dark comedy. I would compare it to something like, although Raising Arizona is not a dark comedy really, but it's got a little bit of Raising Arizona and a little bit of something like Snatch without the Guy Ritchie touches, if you know what I mean, where it's like low-level criminality and kind of flashbacks. The movie jumps around a little bit, 3 days before, 3 days later, 2 hours before, to explain things that happen. And it's a fun smash cut, right? Because you end up having something weird happen, and then to explain it, you cut to 2 hours earlier or whatever. So there was a lot of that going on in the movie. It worked out really well. It was interesting to see that in, I guess this is a Norwegian film, because they were playing Norwegian Scrabble in the movie, which I found very interesting, because the couple gets into an argument over Norwegian Scrabble, and they start spelling words in two different languages, and the husband argues, well, that's not, this is the Norwegian edition, so you had to spell it the Norwegian way, which was very amusing and very not American, if you know what I mean. But the movie has a very broad appeal. Of course, if you've ever been married or in a long relationship, I think you'll kind of get it. It's about a couple who's, they're just on the brink. They're just ready to kill each other over every little thing. And then this, I'll just say, traumatic event happens, which throws the dynamic up in the air and gives them an opportunity to kind of, forces them to re-examine themselves. And then through that, they come to a better conclusion, I'll say. All right, that concludes the non-spoiler review. I recommend this film, especially if you have Netflix already. You absolutely have to be. This is probably one of my top picks on Netflix. Other than Trace, which I also loved, this was totally worth it. I know a lot of you out there were saying, oh, you're going to watch The Harder They Fall because you hated it so much. No, I won't, because it's a waste of my time. I didn't like the trailer. That's the whole point of a screenwriter's rant, is to look at the trailer, analyze the trailer, and use my skills so I don't waste my 2 hours of my time. This was not a waste of my time. The only other movie I was thinking of watching was Dune, and I looked at the running time, and it's 2 hours and 45 minutes. I'm like, I don't really have that kind of time. I got a life to lead, you know? I mean, I love movies, but Jesus, 2 hours and 45 minutes, are you kidding me? And it's only part one? No thanks. This movie wrapped up perfectly, and it was great. Total recommend. Okay, non-spoiler review. Let's break it down, screenwriters. The first act, really well-paced movie. Starts out nice and slow. I mean, the opening scenes with Lars buying all this stuff. I mean, you're going to go into the movie knowing the premise, right? Everybody knew the premise of the movie. I assume the trip, you see the trailer, you kind of get it. So when Lars is buying all these things and prepping essentially his wife's murder, it's funny to watch because he's just quietly doing it. And you can kind of know the wheels are turning in his head as he's taking each step slowly, and they're establishing the characters. One of the great ways they establish the characters, the convicts who end up showing up at the cabin later, is they just do a quick cutaway to a news show, and you see a brief little bit of news thing, you know, just out of the blue. It doesn't look like anything in the movie. It looks like, oh, it's just whatever's on TV. The setup's just so great because it's this long, torturous buildup, right, to Lars eventually deciding, okay, now it's time to kill Lisa. And just as he's about to kill her, of course, boom, she turns the tables. And then we get the scene with Lisa and Lars, which is a great scene because it's really about their relationship and how it's soured and all the complaints they have. And then Lisa, you know, prepping to kill him, and they're both comparing their plans to kill each other, right? And then Victor comes in, right? So then Victor is the one thing that Lisa doesn't expect. And then, you know, the big trade-off is, and this might be a point of contention with some of you, when Lars kills Victor, right? So Lars kills Victor, and you might say, well, doesn't that make him unsympathetic? Not really. I mean, I think Lars and Lisa are equally unsympathetic to a point because they both wanted to actually kill the other. But the fact that Victor turns on Lars in that bidding war with the insurance money, that at that moment, you know, Victor is sort of made his bed, right? And then when Lars ends up shooting his hand off to get the gun back, and then they're panicking, and then, you know, Lisa tells him to stop him, and then he ends up shooting him, and she was like, no, I meant stop the bleeding. I mean, that was a great scene. Then, so that's the first act, I would say, ends when either Victor shows up or when Lisa turns the tables. Then the second act is mostly consumed by the death of Victor and the convicts entering, and then really it turns dark for a few minutes there, right? The convicts look very goofy and wacky when they do their setup with Roy eating the berries and, you know, all the things that happen. And then, you know, he takes a shit in the attic, which everything comes back in this movie. It's great little details. And so then the second act, man, it just really beats down Lars, right? Lars is just beaten down. Lisa to some extent, but more so Lars than Lisa. And then the third act, of course, is when the couple finally turns the tables on the criminals. And for a moment, it looks like Lars is going to abandon Lisa, and he sort of does right at the beginning there, which makes you wonder, well, maybe he wanted to just leave and leave her to die. But, you know, so they eventually come together to fight the convicts. And, of course, the great moment towards the end there is when the father rolls in. I mean, that just comes out of nowhere. I mean, he's the only other character, but it's just funny. And another, you know, flashback of how it all happened. Great. And man, people in this movie are tough, right? I mean, they're constantly being stabbed and shot and all these horrible things happening. I mean, Lars, keep in mind, Lars got stabbed early in the movie in the foot. And then later in the movie, he's running around. He gets punched in the face like a bunch of times. And then the denouement is fantastic because Lars, a director, she's an actress, and they use that all at the end, right? They turn their horrible tragedy into a movie, which is a complete lie, which is a great funny ending when you see the scene and who plays Lars. Right? So it's great. I mean, it's a send-up of Hollywood, relationships. It's got dark comedy. It's got a ton of gore. This is not for little kids, obviously. Fargo would be a good comparison, I think, right? Because Fargo gets pretty bloody and has that sort of low-level crime thing going. But yeah, I would totally compare it to that. I can't recommend it enough, really. There's not a lot of great stuff on Netflix. And really, all the foreign films are just kicking Hollywood's ass. Just absolutely kicking ass all up and down Hollywood. You mean to tell me you're going to spend $15, $16, $20 to go see The Eternals? The Eternals? When you could see this movie on Netflix for probably nothing, or the cost of Netflix, whatever that is. I don't know. I'm still getting Netflix for free. I still don't know how. It delivers on every level. It's well paced, well shot, well acted. Naomi, of course, is great. She's always been great. Plays, there's a lot of different levels here in terms of the relationship, in terms of the various characters. I got to really hand it to the director for really knowing the minute details here. I love the different scenes from different perspectives when you go back in the flashbacks and how it all ties in nice and neatly, and then that final sequence. So this really is a solid screenplay, and it's a screenplay that was followed, right? It was a screenplay that was tight. There wasn't an ounce of fat here. I think the only luxurious moment, I'll say, is the scene between Lars and his dad. But it's a nice moment, right? It's a nice moment. It kind of like capstones the characters a little bit before Lars finally picks up the baton and basically becomes a hero, becomes a man, right? And the father character is just great. The montage of him showing up at the cabin is just off the wall, hilarious. And it gives you a little bit of insight to what that part of Europe's like, too, which is great, too. It's not political at all, except maybe you could say that last scene, the movie, the casting in the movie is. So, man, I just can't recommend this movie enough. It's my kind of movie. It's comedy. It's dark comedy. It's well written, well acted. I really can't see any downside to this other than Hollywood might decide to remake it because it's that good. It's that good. So definitely see The Trip, starring Naomi Pace. I want to say Pace, but it's not Pace. It's pronounced something. She's Naomi from the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Prometheus, right? Remember the Ripley role in Prometheus? Prometheus. Terrible movie. But this, fantastic. It shows again, Naomi is great at picking projects, right? And in her home country, why go to Hollywood? Why go to Hollywood when you're making movies this good? Because they'll get here. They'll get here. A movie this good, it made it here for a reason. It made it here because it's that good. Netflix saw it, and I'll hand it to Netflix. Netflix was smart to pick up this movie. Very smart. Despite all my problems with Netflix, and I got a lot of problems with Netflix, they're still picking good foreign movies, at least. Fantastic foreign movies. So watch The Trip on Netflix. That's it for me, Tony D, and we'll see you in the next one. Check me out on Bitchute and Rumble.